Susan Miller stood at the viewport of the international space vessel Odyssey, watching as the massive Vraxian ship approached the neutral space station. The metallic disc-shaped vessel glistened in the light of Jupiter's glow, its surface etched, with swirling patterns that seemed to move if you stared too long. "Commander Miller, they're requesting docking confirmation," said Communications Officer Peter Garcia, his voice tight with tension. Susan nodded, turning away from the viewport. "Confirm docking and alert the welcome party. It's time." As the first human chosen to meet with the Vraxian Confederation, Susan felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. After decades of distant observation, the aliens had finally reached out 6 months ago, expressing interest in diplomatic relations. Every government on Earth had scrambled to prepare, and Susan had been selected based on her exceptional diplomatic record and her uncanny ability to adapt to unexpected situations. "Commander," said Alan Reeves, her security officer, "I still think this meeting should happen on Earth, where we have more control." Susan shook her head. The Vraxians were clear. Neutral territory or no meeting. Besides, having it here gives us both equal footing. Alan frowned but said nothing more. At 42, he had spent his career protecting diplomats in hostile territories on Earth. Space diplomacy was new territory for everyone. The station's alarms chimed, indicating the Vraxian ship had successfully docked. Susan straightened her blue uniform and headed for the airlock, flanked by Alan and Dr. Olivia Perez, the expedition's medical officer. "Remember," Susan told her small team, "we represent all of humanity today. Let's make a good impression." The airlock cycled open, revealing 3 tall figures. The Vraxians stood nearly 7 feet tall, with slender bodies covered in pale gray skin that seemed to shimmer under the station lights. Their 4-fingered hands ended in short claws, and their faces featured large, pupil-less eyes that glowed with an inner violet light. "Greetings, representatives of Earth," said the center figure, its voice coming through a small device at its throat. "I am High Counselor Zrek of the Vraxian Confederation. We come in peace and with interest in your developing world." Susan stepped forward, offering the gesture of open palms that their briefings had indicated was the Vraxian equivalent of a handshake. "High Counselor Zrek, I am Commander Susan Miller of Earth. We welcome you and look forward to fruitful discussions between our peoples." Zrek's mouth, a small slit beneath those glowing eyes, curved slightly upward. "Indeed, we have much to share with your species." As they walked toward the conference room, Susan couldn't help noticing how the Vraxians moved with liquid grace, their long limbs flowing rather than stepping. The 2 Vraxians flanking Zrek carried what appeared to be scientific instruments, constantly scanning their surroundings. "Your biology interests us greatly," said Zrek, noticing Susan watching the scanners. "We have encountered few carbon-based species with your particular attributes." Dr. Perez perked up at this. "We would be happy to share our medical knowledge. We're equally curious about Vraxian physiology." The 3 Vraxians exchanged glances that Susan couldn't interpret. "All in good time," Zrek replied. In the conference room, the Earth delegation presented their proposal for cultural and technological exchange. The Vraxians listened politely, but Susan sensed an underlying current of something. Not hostility exactly, but perhaps condescension. "Your offer is considerate," Zrek said after they finished. "But we must be practical. Your civilization is young. You have only recently achieved basic space travel. What can Earth offer that would interest the Confederation?" Susan had been prepared for this. "We don't pretend to match your technological achievements, High Counselor, but every species has unique perspectives and innovations. Earth's biodiversity alone contains solutions to problems you may never have encountered, and humans are remarkably adaptable problem solvers." "Adaptable," echoed Zrek, those violet eyes fixing on Susan with new intensity. "Yes, we have observed this quality. It is noteworthy." One of the other Vraxians leaned over to whisper something to Zrek, who nodded slightly. "Commander Miller," Zrek continued, "we propose a week of preliminary discussions to determine areas of mutual benefit. We are particularly interested in human biological responses to various environments. Your species seems unusually resilient." Susan smiled diplomatically. We would be happy to discuss scientific cooperation, though any biological research would need careful ethical oversight. Of course, Zrek replied smoothly. We respect your protocols. As the meeting continued, Susan noticed subtle oddities in the Vraxians' behavior. They seemed overly interested in human eating habits, asking detailed questions about digestion and metabolism. When refreshments were brought in, the aliens watched intently as the humans drank water and ate simple snacks. Later, as Susan escorted the Vraxians back to their ship, Zrek made an unexpected proposal. Tomorrow, we would like to host you aboard our vessel for a ceremonial meal. It is our custom when welcoming new species into potential alliance. Alan stiffened beside Susan. Our protocols require, we would be honored, Susan interrupted, giving Alan a warning glance. Refusing such an invitation could derail the entire diplomatic mission. Though we do have certain dietary restrictions, we have studied human nutritional requirements extensively, Zrek assured her, those violet eyes unblinking. The meal will be completely safe for human consumption. After the Vraxians departed, Alan confronted Susan in the corridor. Commander, with all due respect, accepting food from an unknown species is a serious security risk. I'm aware of the risk, Alan, Susan replied. But this is how diplomacy works. Sometimes you have to extend trust to receive it. She turned to Dr. Perez. Olivia, prep the medical bay just in case, and make sure our scanners are calibrated to detect any known toxins. That night, as Susan reviewed the day's recordings, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way the Vraxians had watched them eat, their intense interest in human biology, their insistence on providing food. But Earth needed this alliance. The Vraxians' faster-than-light technology alone could advance human civilization by centuries. Some risk was inevitable in first-contact situations. Susan sighed and closed the files. Tomorrow would be a historic day, the first time humans would break bread with an alien species. She just hoped they were breaking bread and not something more sinister. What she couldn't know was that aboard the Vraxian ship, High Counselor Zrek was overseeing the preparation of a special compound, one their scientists had assured would temporarily incapacitate the human diplomat without causing permanent damage. After all, a weakened negotiator made for better terms, and humans were simply too unpredictable to be allowed full strength during these critical first negotiations. Is the formula ready? Zrek asked the Vraxian chemist. Yes, High Counselor. The sulfur-based compound will be undetectable to human senses, but should reduce their cognitive function by 60% within hours of consumption. Excellent. These humans may be clever for primitives, but they are still primitives. By tomorrow evening, Commander Miller will be grateful for whatever terms we offer. Little did the Vraxians know that their careful calculations about human biochemistry were about to prove catastrophically wrong. The next day, Susan and her small team prepared to board the Vraxian vessel. Alan Reeves checked his scanner one last time, making sure it was properly calibrated to detect known toxins. Remember, Susan told her team, this is a major step forward in human-alien relations. The first shared meal between our species. And possibly the last, Alan muttered, adjusting his uniform. Dr. Perez gave him a sharp look. Try to be positive, Alan. I've studied the Vraxian biological data they shared. Their diet is sulfur-based, but they've clearly put effort into making food compatible with our biology. The airlock connecting the station to the Vraxian ship opened with a soft hiss. High Counselor Zrek stood waiting, flanked by several other Vraxians, in what appeared to be ceremonial robes of shimmering blue material. Commander Miller, we welcome you to the vessel Starlight Voyager, Zrek said, making the open-palmed gesture of greeting. Our chef, Velcor, has spent many hours preparing a meal suitable for both our species. Susan returned the gesture. We're honored by your hospitality, High Counselor. The interior of the Vraxian ship was unlike anything Susan had seen before. The corridors curved organically, the walls seeming to pulse with soft light that followed their movement. The air carried, a faint smell of something like cinnamon mixed with ozone. They were led to a large circular chamber. In the center stood a round table made of a material that resembled polished obsidian, but felt warm to the touch. Low, cushioned seats surrounded it, and the ceiling above displayed what appeared to be a real-time view of Jupiter's swirling clouds. "Please, be seated," Zrek said, gesturing to the human-sized chairs that had clearly been prepared specially for them. "The ceremonial feast will begin shortly." As they took their seats, Susan noticed several Vraxians positioned around the room, some holding scientific instruments similar to the scanners from the previous day. They seemed to be taking readings of the humans, though they tried to be discreet about it. Alan leaned close to Susan. "They're scanning us," he whispered. "I see it," she replied quietly. "Stay alert, but friendly." A new Vraxian entered, pushing a hovering cart filled with covered dishes. This must be Velkor, the chef. Unlike the others, his skin had a bluish tint, and 6 small appendages extended from his wrists, moving independently like extra fingers. "Esteemed guests from Earth," Velkor announced, his translation device giving his voice a melodic quality. "I present a feast honoring our first formal alliance discussions. Each dish has been carefully crafted to be enjoyable and safe for human consumption." The covers lifted from the dishes seemingly on their own, revealing an array of foods. Some plates held familiar-looking items, something resembling bread, vegetables cut into geometric patterns, and what looked like meat in a dark sauce. Other dishes were clearly meant for the Vraxians, bubbling with yellow-green substances that emitted thin wisps of vapor. Dr. Perez discreetly ran her scanner over the human food. She gave Susan a small nod. No known toxins detected. Zrek raised. A glass filled with clear liquid. "A toast to new understanding between our peoples." Susan and her team raised their glasses in response. The liquid tasted like slightly sweet water with a hint of mint. Not unpleasant. As they began eating, Susan noticed the Vraxians watching them intently, particularly Zrek, whose violet eyes rarely left her face. The food was surprisingly good. The bread had a nutty flavor, and the meat-like substance tasted similar to well-seasoned beef, though its texture was softer. "This is excellent, Velkor," Susan said, genuinely impressed. "You've done remarkable work adapting your cooking to human tastes." The chef made a gesture that seemed to express pleasure. "It was a fascinating challenge. Your biology is so different from ours." "Speaking of biology," Zrek interjected, "we are curious how humans have adapted to survive on a planet with such varied environments. Your species lives in deserts, Arctic regions, high altitudes, all with the same basic physiology." Susan nodded. "Humans are adaptable. We use technology to help us survive extreme environments, but our bodies can also adjust to different conditions over time." "Fascinating," said another Vraxian who had been introduced as Science Minister Kell. "And your digestive system can process such a wide variety of compounds." The conversation continued, but Susan couldn't shake the feeling that this meal was more of a scientific observation than a diplomatic event. The Vraxians asked detailed questions about human metabolism, immune responses, and reaction to various substances. They seemed particularly interested in how humans process certain minerals. Throughout the meal, Alan remained tense, barely touching his food. Dr. Perez, however, engaged enthusiastically with the Vraxians, exchanging medical information that seemed harmless enough. As the meal progressed, Susan noticed Zrek and Velkor exchange a glance when she took a bite from a particular dish, a dark purple fruit with a custard-like center. The scanner had shown it was safe, but something about their reaction made her uneasy. Nevertheless, she finished her plate, determined to show good faith. The sweet fruit had a pleasant aftertaste that lingered on her tongue. After the meal, Zrek proposed they move to another chamber to begin preliminary negotiations. As they walked, Susan felt a strange warmth spreading from her stomach through her limbs. Not unpleasant, but definitely unusual. She caught Dr. Perez's eye and gave a subtle nod toward the medical scanner. Perez understood immediately and fell into step beside Susan, discreetly activating her device. In the negotiation chamber, Zrek outlined the Vraxian proposal. They would share limited technological knowledge, primarily in the areas of sustainable energy and agricultural techniques, in exchange for extensive access to Earth's biological resources and the right to establish 3 research outposts on Earth. These terms seem one-sided, Susan pointed out, surprised by the boldness of her own voice. Usually she was more diplomatic, but something felt different. Her mind seemed exceptionally clear, her thoughts racing ahead to analyze every angle of the proposal. Earth would gain knowledge that we might develop ourselves within decades, while you gain immediate access to our entire biosphere. Zrek's eyes narrowed slightly. Commander Miller, given the vast technological gap between our civilizations, we believe these terms are quite generous. Susan felt energy coursing through her body. She stood straighter, her fatigue from the previous day completely gone. I disagree, High Counselor. Innovation isn't measured solely by technological advancement. Earth has much to offer beyond biological samples. The Vraxians exchanged glances, and Susan caught something in their expressions. Confusion? Concern? Science Minister Kell whispered something to Zrek, who looked increasingly agitated. Hours into the negotiations, when Susan should have been tired, she instead felt more alert than ever. Ideas and counter-proposals flowed easily, and she found herself spotting subtle implications in the Vraxian offers that she might normally have missed. Alan stayed close to her, noticing the change. "Commander," he whispered during a brief recess, "are you feeling all right?" "Better than all right," Susan replied, surprised by the truth of it. "I feel incredible." Dr. Perez approached them, her face serious. "Commander, my scanner is showing unusual activity in your cellular structure. Nothing dangerous, but definitely not normal." Susan looked across the room at the Vraxian delegation, who were huddled together in intense discussion. High Counselor Zrek kept glancing her way with what could only be described as bewilderment. "I think," Susan said slowly, "our hosts expected this meeting to go very differently." She smiled, feeling stronger by the minute. "And I believe we're about to find out why." When the negotiations paused for a short break, Dr. Perez pulled Susan and Alan into a small alcove away from the Vraxians. "Something strange is happening to your body," Dr. Perez said, showing Susan the scanner results. "Your cellular energy production has increased by 40%. Your neural activity is off the charts. And there's a foreign compound in your bloodstream that doesn't match anything in our database." Susan flexed her hand, noticing how the movement felt more precise, more controlled. "I feel amazing, like I've had the best night's sleep of my life and 10 cups of coffee, but without any jitters." Alan's face darkened. "They did something to you. That purple fruit." "I think you're right," Susan agreed. "But why would they give me something that makes me feel better, stronger?" Dr. Perez studied her scanner again. "I don't think that was their intention. This compound is interacting with your mitochondria, the parts of your cells that produce energy. In most Earth animals, this level of stimulation would cause a dangerous reaction. But in humans," she looked up, her eyes wide. "It's like the compound found the perfect environment to become a super booster. So they tried to poison me, but it had the opposite effect," Susan said slowly. "That explains their confusion." Alan's hand moved to his weapon. "We should leave immediately. This was clearly an act of hostility." "No," Susan said firmly. "This is now an advantage. They tried to weaken me for negotiations, but instead, I'm at my best. Let's use this." When they returned to the negotiation chamber, Susan immediately noticed the tension among the Vraxians. Zrek and Science Minister Kell were having a heated whispered conversation, while Velkor the chef hovered nervously near the entrance. Susan strode confidently to the table. "Shall we continue, High Counselor? I believe we were discussing the unbalanced nature of your proposal." Zrek's violet eyes studied her with new intensity. "Commander Miller, are you feeling unusual in any way?" "I feel excellent," Susan replied with a smile. "In fact, I've never felt better. Now, about those research outposts you requested, we would need much more substantial technology exchange to consider such access. For the next 2 hours, Susan negotiated with remarkable clarity and focus. She recalled details from previous briefings with perfect accuracy, spotted logical flaws in the Vraxian arguments immediately, and proposed creative compromise solutions that protected Earth's interests while still offering genuine value to the Vraxians. Throughout this, she noticed the aliens growing increasingly agitated. Kel kept checking a small device, looking at Susan, then back at the device with obvious disbelief. Finally, Susan decided it was time to confront the issue directly. She placed her hands flat on the table and leaned forward. "High Counselor Zrek, I believe there's something we should discuss openly. The compound you added to my food during our meal. What was it intended to do?" The room went completely silent. The Vraxians froze, their shimmering skin seeming to dim slightly. Zrek's mouth opened and closed several times before he spoke. "I don't understand what you mean, Commander." "I think you do," Susan replied calmly. "My medical officer has detected a foreign substance in my system, a substance that appears to be enhancing my cognitive and physical capabilities rather dramatically. This was in the purple fruit, wasn't it?" Alan stood behind Susan, his stance protective. Dr. Perez held up her scanner, showing the readings. Science Minister Kell made a strange clicking sound that the translation device didn't process. Zrek shot him a warning look, then seemed to come to a decision. "Commander Miller," Zrek said slowly, "there appears to have been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," Susan repeated. "Is that what you call attempted poisoning in the Vraxian Confederation?" Zrek's skin rippled, a sign of distress they had observed earlier. "The compound was not meant to harm you permanently. It was designed to temporarily reduce cognitive function, a standard diplomatic advantage technique in our culture." Alan stepped forward. "You drugged our commander? That's an act of war. Where we come from?" Susan held up her hand to calm Alan. "What I'm more interested in is why it had the opposite effect. Care to explain, Science Minister Kell? You seem quite disturbed by the readings on your device." Kell looked to Zrek, who nodded reluctantly. "The compound contains sulfur-based molecules that interfere with energy production in most carbon-based life forms," Kell explained. "In every species we've encountered, it causes temporary lethargy and mental fog. But in your system," he gestured helplessly, "your mitochondria are using it as a hyper-efficient fuel source. Instead of blocking energy, it's creating more. We've never seen anything like it." "Human biochemistry is full of surprises," Dr. Perez said, a note of pride in her voice. "Our cells evolved on a planet with highly variable conditions and threats. We're extremely adaptable at the cellular level." Susan considered this information. The Vraxians had tried to cheat, to drug her into accepting an unfair deal. By their own admission, this was standard practice for them. But it had backfired spectacularly. "High Counselor Zrek," Susan said, her voice firm but measured, "I think we need to restart these negotiations from a place of genuine respect and honesty. Your attempt to handicap me has failed. In fact, it has given me an unexpected advantage." She stood up, feeling stronger than ever. "I propose we adjourn for today and resume tomorrow. In the meantime, my medical team will study this compound further. Its effects on humans could be quite significant." Zrek's violet eyes narrowed. "This compound is proprietary Vraxian technology. We would require its return." Susan laughed, a sound that seemed to startle the aliens. "It's currently bonded to my cells, helping them function at unprecedented levels. I don't think return is an option. However, I'm willing to discuss a proper technology exchange, one that acknowledges what you've inadvertently given us." The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. The Vraxians had accidentally provided humans with a potential breakthrough in cellular energy enhancement. "Tomorrow," Susan continued, "we'll present a new framework for cooperation, one based on mutual respect, not tricks and poisons. I suggest you consider carefully what humanity might offer when we're at our best, rather than trying to see what you can take when we're at our weakest." As they left the chamber, Susan could feel the Vraxians' eyes on her back. Their plan had not just failed, it had given humanity leverage they never expected to have. Back on the Odyssey, Dr. Perez immediately took Susan to the medical bay for comprehensive testing. As the scanner hummed over her body, Susan watched the results appear on the screen. "This is remarkable," Dr. Perez breathed. "The compound isn't just temporarily boosting your system, it's stabilizing at the cellular level. These changes could be permanent." Susan looked down at her hands, feeling the energy coursing through her body. "They tried to make me less and accidentally made me more. The question is, what do we do with this gift they didn't mean to give?" Alan, who had been standing guard at the door, spoke up. "We use it to make sure they never try something like this with humans again." Susan nodded slowly. "Yes, but also more than that. If this compound works the same way for other humans, we might have just stumbled into the next stage of human potential." The next morning, Susan woke after just 4 hours of sleep feeling completely refreshed. Dr. Perez had monitored her throughout the night, recording data on the compound's effects. "Your body has fully integrated the substance," Dr. Perez explained, showing Susan the latest scans. "Your cellular efficiency is now nearly twice normal human baseline. Brain activity, muscle response, even your immune system, everything is operating at enhanced levels." Susan stretched, feeling the new power in her movements. "Any negative side effects?" "None that I can detect so far. Your body temperature is slightly elevated, and you're burning calories faster, but otherwise, the changes appear beneficial." Dr. Perez hesitated. "I've sent the data to Earth. Scientists there are calling it revolutionary." Alan entered the medical bay, his face serious. "The Vraxians are requesting to resume negotiations immediately. They seem anxious." Susan smiled. "I bet they are." Before heading to the meeting, Susan called a briefing with her team. "We need to approach this strategically. The Vraxians have accidentally given us something valuable, but they'll try to minimize it. They might even try to reverse the effects," Dr. Perez warned. Susan nodded. "Which is why I've asked Earth Command to keep most of our findings confidential for now. The Vraxians know their compound enhanced me, but they don't know exactly how much or whether it's permanent." Alan frowned. "You're going to bluff?" "Not bluff. Negotiate from a position of strength." Susan straightened her uniform. "Let's go show them what humans can do when pushed." When they arrived at the negotiation chamber, the entire Vraxian delegation was waiting. Zrek stood as they entered, his violet eyes fixed on Susan with obvious concern. "Commander Miller," he began, "after yesterday's unfortunate misunderstanding, we wish to—" "Attempted poisoning," Susan corrected firmly. "Let's call things what they are, High Counselor." Zrek's skin rippled. "As I was saying after that regrettable incident, my government has authorized me to offer compensation. We are prepared to provide advanced medical technology and to withdraw our request for research outposts on Earth." Susan took her seat, feeling unusually calm and focused. "That's a start, but it doesn't address the compound now enhancing my system." Science Minister Kell leaned forward. "About that, we believe we can develop a neutralizing agent. For your safety, of course." "My safety?" Susan raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Perez has been monitoring me closely. The compound appears to be highly beneficial to human physiology." "That's impossible to predict long term," Kell insisted. "The compound was never designed for making humans stronger," Susan finished. "No, it was designed to weaken us during negotiations. A standard diplomatic advantage technique, you called it." The Vraxians shifted uncomfortably. "Here's our position," Susan continued. "The attempted poisoning violated basics diplomatic protocol. On Earth, it would be considered an act of war. However, we're willing to move forward under new terms." She activated a holographic display showing a revised proposal. "Equal exchange. Your faster-than-light drive technology for our biological research on how the compound interacts with human cells." Zrek's eyes widened. "That is our most guarded technology. It took our civilization centuries to develop. And you just accidentally gave us a cellular enhancement compound that could advance human medicine by decades," Susan countered. "Fair trade." The negotiations became intense. For hours, Susan engaged with the Vraxians, her enhanced mind processing complex details and spotting hidden implications in their counteroffers that she might have missed before. When they tried to use technical jargon to confuse issues, she caught them immediately. During a brief recess, Zrek approached Susan privately. "Commander," he said quietly, "you must understand our concern. The compound you've been exposed to was derived from sensitive research. If humans can metabolize it this way..." Susan studied his face. "You're afraid of us." Zrek's skin darkened slightly. "Afraid is not the word. Cautious. Your species is remarkably adaptive. Most civilizations develop along predictable paths, but humans, you evolve in unexpected ways. Now, with this accidental enhancement, you're worried what we might become," Susan realized. "The Vraxian Confederation has encountered many species. None have shown your particular combination of adaptability and determination." Zrek hesitated. "The compound was meant to ensure we maintained technological superiority while we assessed humanity's potential threat level." Susan felt a chill despite her enhanced metabolism. "So this wasn't just about gaining advantage in negotiations. You see humans as a potential threat. All unknown variables must be evaluated," Zrek said simply. When negotiations resumed, Susan had a new perspective on what was really at stake. This wasn't just about technology exchange. It was about humanity's place in a larger galactic community. "New proposal," she announced. "We will share our research on the compound's effects on human biology with full transparency. In exchange, the Vraxian Confederation will sponsor Earth's entrance into the galactic diplomatic community as equals, not as a primitive species to be studied and contained." The Vraxians conferred among themselves urgently. Susan could see the debate was heated, though she couldn't hear what they were saying. Finally, Zrek turned to her. "Your terms are unexpected, but perhaps appropriate given the circumstances. We accept with one condition. Any further development of the compound must be done jointly, with Vraxian oversight." Susan considered this. "Joint research, yes. Oversight, no. Partnership between equals." After another tense moment, Zrek extended his hand in a distinctly human gesture they had obviously researched. "Agreed." As Susan shook his hand, she could feel the strength in her enhanced muscles and knew she could have crushed his fingers if she wanted to. Instead, she gave a firm but measured handshake. "I believe this is the beginning of a more honest relationship between our peoples," she said. Later, aboard the Odyssey, Alan expressed his concerns. "Do you trust them to honor the agreement?" Susan looked out at the Vraxian ship through the viewport. "Trust needs to be earned, but they now know that trying to underestimate or control humans has consequences. We turn obstacles into advantages." "Doctor," Perez entered with new test results. "Earth scientists want to begin controlled tests of the compound immediately. They're calling it the Vraxian Catalyst." "The Vraxians won't like that name," Alan said with a rare smile. "They'll have to get used to it," Susan replied. "They tried to make us less and made us more instead. That's a very human story." She touched the viewport glass looking toward Earth, barely visible as a small blue dot from their position near Jupiter. "And it's only the beginning." 6 months later, Susan stood at the podium in the newly constructed Interspecies Diplomatic Center in Geneva. Representatives from 12 Earth nations sat before her, along with a delegation of Vraxians, including High Counselor Zrek. The room hummed with anticipation as she prepared to deliver her report. "The Vraxian Catalyst Initiative has completed its first phase of testing," Susan began. Her voice was strong and clear, carrying easily to the back of the large chamber without a microphone. This was just one of many enhanced abilities she now possessed. "The results have exceeded our most optimistic projections." Behind her, a large screen displayed charts and images of the testing process. Dr. Perez, now heading the international research team, advanced the slides as Susan spoke. "In controlled doses, the compound improves human cellular efficiency by an average of 60%. Physical endurance increases, mental processing improves, immune response strengthens. Even cellular repair mechanisms work faster, potentially extending human lifespan. Susan glanced at the Vraxian delegation. Zrek's face was unreadable, but Science Minister Kell looked distinctly uncomfortable. As agreed in our treaty, all research has been conducted with full transparency. Vraxian scientists have participated in every stage of testing, and as a show of good faith we have honored their request to limit initial human participants to 500 volunteers worldwide. This restriction had been the most contentious point in the follow-up negotiations. The Vraxians had initially wanted to limit the enhancement to just the diplomatic corps, but Earth governments had insisted on including scientists, doctors, and a selection of people with serious medical conditions who might benefit most immediately. The first medical applications have been particularly promising, Susan continued. Patients with energy-deficient conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome have shown complete recovery. Early tests with neurodegenerative diseases show the compound slows or halts progression by enhancing cellular repair mechanisms. From the front row, Alan gave her an encouraging nod. He had been among the second wave of volunteers to receive the treatment after initial safety was confirmed. Like Susan, he now operated at enhanced levels, though each person's response to the compound varied slightly. As we move to Phase 2, we will expand treatment to approximately 10,000 additional volunteers, focusing on medical professionals, emergency responders, and patients with conditions that might benefit most directly from cellular enhancement. Susan took a moment to look directly at the Vraxian delegation. This controlled, transparent approach demonstrates humanity's commitment to responsible advancement. We understand the power of this technology and are proceeding with appropriate caution. After she finished her presentation, the floor opened for questions. Most came from human representatives, but finally, Zrek stood to speak. "Commander Miller," he said, his translation device giving his voice a formal tone. "The Confederation acknowledges your species' restraint in deploying this enhancement. However, we remain concerned about long-term implications. Our latest models suggest that within 3 generations, if the compound becomes widely available, enhanced humans could develop capabilities beyond our projections." Susan smiled slightly. "That's the nature of humanity, High Counselor. We adapt, we evolve, we transform limitations into possibilities, but we do so with awareness of our responsibilities. And that," Zrek replied, "is precisely what concerns some members of the Confederation. Your unpredictability. Yet here we are," Susan countered, "honoring our agreement for measured, transparent development, despite the fact that your people initially tried to poison our diplomatic representative." The human delegates murmured at this direct reference to the incident, though the basic facts were now common knowledge. Diplomatic statements usually danced around the uncomfortable truth of how the Vraxian catalyst had been discovered. After the formal session ended, Susan found herself approached by Zrek in a quiet corner of the reception hall. "You have handled this situation with unexpected wisdom," the Vraxian said quietly. "Many species would have used such an advantage more aggressively." Susan sipped her water, studying the alien. After 6 months of enhanced cognitive function, she found she could pick up subtle cues in Vraxian body language that she would have missed before. Zrek was genuinely impressed, but still wary. "The irony isn't lost on us," she replied. "Your attempt to make us weaker revealed our strength, but strength doesn't have to mean domination. Perhaps," Zrek said, "we have underestimated your species in more ways than one." A small commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A group of new arrivals was entering the reception, representatives from the Eloran Assembly, another spacefaring civilization that had made contact after hearing of the Earth-Vraxian Treaty. "Your mistake," Susan said to Zrek as they watched the new aliens approach. "Wasn't trying to gain advantage in negotiations. That seems to be standard practice among advanced civilizations. Your mistake was assuming humans would react like other species you've encountered." Zrek's violet eyes shifted back to her. "A mistake we won't make again. Nor will others once word spreads further." "Word of what?" Susan asked. "That humans are dangerous?" "That humans are transformative," Zrek replied carefully. "You take what is given, even poison, and make it into something new. It is a rare quality in the universe. Later that evening, Susan met with her team in a secure conference room. Dr. Perez had new data to share, while Alan provided updates on security protocols for the expanding program. The latest results are fascinating, Dr. Perez explained, showing a complex molecular model on the screen. The compound continues to evolve within human cells, becoming more efficient with each generation of cell division. In your case, Susan, since you've had it longest, the enhancement has reached nearly 100% improvement over baseline human function. And we're seeing variations based on individual genetic factors, added Dr. Kyle Norton, a geneticist, who had joined the project. He had also received the enhancement, his formerly frail frame now vibrant with energy. It's as if the compound adapts differently to each person, optimizing for their unique biology. Susan considered this information. Have you shared these findings with the Vraxians? As per our agreement, yes, Dr. Perez confirmed. Science Minister Kell seemed quite disturbed by the adaptability of the compound within human systems. They're afraid, Alan said bluntly. They created something to weaken us, and instead it's making us stronger in ways they can't predict. Susan looked out the window at the night sky, thinking of the vast universe beyond and the civilizations they were just beginning to encounter. We need to be careful not to confirm their fears. Humanity has a chance to enter the galactic community as partners, not threats. But we should be prepared, Alan cautioned. Not every species will welcome our arrival, especially as the enhancement spreads. Susan nodded. The Vraxians tried to poison one human and it backfired, but that one mistake has changed humanity's future forever. She turned back to her team, her enhanced vision able to pick out every detail of their faces even in the dim light. Our job now is to ensure it changes us for the better. As the meeting ended, Susan remained by the window alone. The stars seemed brighter to her enhanced vision, the possibilities they represented more tangible than ever before. An accidental gift from reluctant aliens had accelerated humanity's development by perhaps a century or more. And this was just the beginning. The universe had no idea what humans could become when challenged, when pushed, when someone tried to make them less and instead made them more. Susan smiled. The Vraxians would adapt to the new reality. Other alien civilizations would learn, and humanity would continue to do what it had always done best, turn obstacles into stepping stones and poisons into cures. The universe wasn't ready, but it would have to adjust.